What a day in Japan, guys. Powerful magnitude 7.6 earthquake hit Japan and evacuation alerts, panic, a tsunami hit the coastlines. But also, after this quake, the Japanese government has issued for the first time ever a Hokkaido Sanriku offshore earthquake warning for a Megathrust earthquake that could be incoming within the next 7 days. We're talking about 2011 style magnitude 9 plus Megathrust earthquake. This new advisory was actually created after the Tohoku earthquake in 2011, and it means that for about a week their models say the chance of an even larger quake in this segment jumps higher. So are we right now watching the birth of another gigantic mega quake along the Japan Trench? This is where we have the epicenter of the magnitude 7.6, and the aftershocks keep coming, guys, in the high magnitudes. Or are we just seeing the Pacific Ring of Fire doing what it always does, creating these subduction zone earthquakes and earthquakes along secondary fault lines? Because in the last few months, we've had the magnitude 8.8 Kamchatka Megathrust earthquake in July. Then we have now the magnitude 7.6 quake off the Sanriku Tohoku coast in Japan with tsunami warnings. A tsunami reached the coast, aftershock warning, all very similar to what happened in 2011. So is the same happening again here? And are these earthquakes connected? We will talk about this in this video, because we also had today a magnitude 5.7 earthquake off the coast of Hualien in Taiwan, basically on the opposite of the Philippine Sea Plate. So is this slow slip event off the coast of Tohoku and micro tremors, is this a possible precursor to a much bigger quake? I want to walk you through this in this video to three major key events. Number one, what just happened off the coast of Japan? What do we actually know so far about this quake and what might come? And number two, very important, how does this compare to the precursors that were happening in 2011 before the magnitude 9.0 Tohoku earthquake? And number three, is there any real connection between this magnitude 7.6 earthquake and the Kamchatka aftershocks and today's Taiwan earthquake? And I want to talk to you about that all in a way. We don't want to sugarcoat things, but we also don't want to panic. We want to look at the facts that we have. So what just happened today off the coast of Tohoku Sanriku? December 8th, local time 11:15-ish around at night, which is never good, magnitude 7.6 earthquake struck in the Pacific off the coast, actually of the Aomori prefecture. That's in the Sanriku segment of the Japan Trench. Depth roughly 40 to 55 kilometers, so a subduction zone event on the plate boundary of the Japan Trench. We definitely have a thrust faulting there where the Pacific plate is diving underneath my favorite plate that I really still don't know how to pronounce perfectly. Pacific plate is diving underneath the Okhotsk plate, and if we compare the shaking to the Japanese Shindo scale, they have their shaking scale with 7 the highest and 1 the lowest. They say it's on the upper 6 level. Strong enough that it's hard to stand, furniture topples, walls can crack, windows did break. So also this quake definitely generated tsunami waves from 20 centimeters to 70 centimeters, half a person basically, at several ports along the northern Pacific coast of Japan. Initial warnings talked about a height of like up to 10 feet, 3 meters, and roughly over 90,000 people were told to evacuate to seek higher ground with sirens in the middle of the night. Really very end of day scenario, hearing that but it's great that they have that. They're really very well prepared. Thankfully, that tsunami warning was later downgraded and eventually lifted. So far, we know that we have more than 30 injuries, mostly, guys, from falling objects and from people rushing to evacuate. That's when they got hurt. No major building collapses reported yet. No serious problems at nuclear power plants, though something happened at a nuclear power plant. Some water sloshed out of a spent fuel pool at a reprocessing facility. So I'm waiting to hear more about that. Let's talk a little bit about the aftershocks. Within hours, the Japanese Meteorological Agency and the USGS have cataloged aftershocks, including magnitude 5 plus and magnitude 6 plus events, and at least one stronger magnitude 6.6 event offshore. You see the map with the epicenters there. They're clustering around the main shock area offshore of Aomori along the Japan Trench, not right on top of the epicenter of the 2011 Tohoku rupture area that is off the coast of Miyagi, but on the northern continuation of the exact same plate boundary. So it is the same area. And here's the key thing, guys. After today's quake, I mentioned it, they issued the first ever offshore earthquake warning for a Megathrust earthquake, valid for 7 days. So what was happening in the days and weeks prior to today's earthquake? We did have swarms of earthquakes and probably slow slip activity that has been happening off the Tohoku Sanriku coast. And there was an earthquake swarm off the Tohoku Sanriku coast with a magnitude 6.8 or 6.9 event on November 9th, and many smaller quakes ranging from magnitudes to 1 to 5. And some seismologists have pointed out that these swarms and small bursts may be linked to short-term slow slip along this plate boundary, very similar to what's been studied in this region for years, very normal for this region. What is slow slip? Well, let's talk about this for a second. So think about the plate boundary where like two giant blocks are pressed together by enormous pressure. So a normal earthquake is when the fault is stuck and then suddenly, poof, it snaps. It releases energy in seconds. That's your main shock. A slow slip event is when the same fault is creeping a little bit, millimeter by millimeter, over days to weeks. It can produce tremors and a lot of tiny earthquakes, but often no obvious strong shaking at the surface. But they are, during these slow slip events, the chances that something could rupture are higher. So yes, we do observe and have observed slow slip swarms before some big earthquakes, including the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. So that's what they have in common. And yes, there has been an unusually busy period off the Tohoku Sanriku coast in late 2025, leading up to this magnitude 7.6 earthquake. But here, guys, now comes the important reality check that we need. Most slow slip events and earthquake swarms do not lead to a giant earthquake. So this is a huge point, especially in scientific literature. Slow slip is common. Only a tiny fraction of episodes end with a megaquake. Well, does that reassure us? Because they can end up with a megaquake. So it's a little bit overconfident if we say a slow slip event will precede a megathrust earthquake. It's a possible scenario, but it is no way a forecast. And what did we actually see before the 2011 Tohoku earthquake happened? Let's rewind back to 2011 because we want to know about a comparison of all the known precursors from Tohoku 2011 to what's happening today. And scientists have spent over a decade dissecting the 2011 sequence, so we can boil it down to 3 main layers. First layer is a month scale. Slow slip and swarm on the plate boundary roughly 1 month before the March 11th, 2011 magnitude 9.1 main shock. So there was a short-term slow slip event on the shallow plate interface in the central Japan trench. And this event was then accompanied by a swarm of earthquakes near 2 strong patch areas that later produced huge slip in the main shock. So think of it as the fault starting to creep in places, adjusting its stress with many small quakes that are rattling around. And the second that we want to look at is the days scale. So the famous magnitude 7.3 foreshock of the Tohoku earthquake and an intense foreshock sequence then 2 days before the magnitude 9.0, 9.1 earthquake happened. And magnitude 7.3 foreshock in the exact, almost the exact area, and it came with a 2-day burst of foreshocks, many events, magnitudes 5 to 6 or higher, right or near the eventual rupture zone. So should today's earthquake be a foreshock to a megathrust earthquake, we probably can expect an epicenter in this area where we now see the main shock and the cluster of aftershocks. Models show that in 2011, yes, the distribution of these earthquakes was not random. The foreshocks were strongly clustered in time and in space, and many researchers interpret them as tied to an accelerating slow slip in the last days before the eventual failure and the megathrust earthquake. The third scale that I want to look at is the years scale, a long transient in the deeper plate interference. That's what we're looking at. So some scientists also suggest that there was a long-term transient slow slip over several years in the way deeper part of the subduction zone interface, gradually evolving the stress state before 2011. Not everyone agrees on these details, by the way, but the big picture definitely is the 2011 Tohoku earthquake was not a completely, this is an out of the blue event. It was not. There were a month of subtle slow slip and days of very, very obvious foreshocks before the magnitude 9+ earthquake. And at the same time, and that's interesting, a 2024 global study that has stacked GPS data before many earthquakes larger than magnitude 7 suggests that a lot of large earthquakes show some kind of short-term precursory slow slip, but we usually can't detect it clearly in real time. That's the problem. So if we compare 2011 to today's 7.6 earthquake, let's now line up the things side by side. 2011, 9.0 off the coast of Miyagi, central Japan trench, roughly south of today's epicenter. Today's earthquake off the coast of Aomori, northern continuation of the same trench, but closer to Hokkaido. So same subduction system, but not the exact segment of the plate boundary. Precursory activity in 2011, a clear month scale slow slip event swarm near key patches, intense 2-day foreshock burst with a 7.3 right in the main rupture area. And before today's quake, documented swarm activity off Tohoku Sanriku coast, including magnitude 6, magnitude 6.9 on November 9th, and many smaller quakes. And short-term slow slip, but this is still interpretation. We don't have fully processed this scientific paper yet, but it looks like there was a slow slip event. We do not have an obvious magnitude 7 class foreshock in the same patch just 2 days before, the way we did in 2011. So for now, the 7.6 is the biggest event so far. So it could be a foreshock. That's why they have issued this warning. So right now, our current picture looks like this, guys. We have a busy trench with swarms and a big one, 7.6. Not yet 2011 textbook style foreshock chain to a magnitude 9. Not yet. Could change. So we have the aftershocks. What's next? After the current 7.6 Sanriku quake, we've already seen the aftershocks up to magnitude 6.6, which is strong, but still totally normal for a magnitude 7.6 sequence. So far, these aftershocks are clustered around the main shock area, not marching systematically towards a new separate patch of areas that would scream imminent rupture. The Japanese meteorological agency's Hokkaido Sanriku offshore earthquake warning is essentially saying, we know from 2011 that a big quake can be followed by an even bigger one nearby in the short term. We don't see proof of that yet now, but the statistical risk is temporarily elevated, so please stay prepared. That is what they're saying. That's definitely cautious and scientifically reasonable, but it's not a prediction of doom, guys. And let's have a look at the Kamchatka aftershocks that we're still seeing in the higher magnitudes. And this is where it gets very interesting from a tectonic point of view. So the Kamchatka Megathrust Earthquake in July, magnitude 8.8, ruptured a huge chunk of the cool Kamchatka Trench, guys, to the north of Japan. So it has produced by now thousands of aftershocks, including another magnitude 7.8 just in September. And the aftershock sequence is still going on with events magnitude 5, something like that. And the Japan Trench of Tohoku and Sanriku is basically the southern continuation of the exact same Pacific Plate boundary system. So in very simple words, Kamchatka and Tohoku sit on different sections of the same gigantic, dangerous zipper, if we want to compare it to that, the zipper between the Pacific Plate and the overriding plates. So when you unzip one huge section with a magnitude 8.8 earthquake, you absolutely change the stress field along the neighboring sections. We know from many cases, like from Chile and the 2011 Tohoku earthquake itself, that big quakes can trigger slow slip somewhere else. They can trigger changes in earthquake rates on nearby segments over months to even years. So could the Kamchatka magnitude 8.8 Megathrust earthquake, could that have nudged the Sanriku segment a bit closer to failure? Physically, yes, that is plausible. Stress transfer along a subduction margin is real. So this comes from the plates itself and not from something else that's outside. This is stress transfer that probably triggers segments. So proving that this particular magnitude 7.6 would not have happened without Kamchatka is basically absolutely impossible with the current data that we have. So really, guys, the bottom line is, or the honest line is, the two events are part of the same plate system, and they're probably part of a broader stress readjustment in the Pacific, in the northwest of the Pacific Ring of Fire. But we cannot say the Kamchatka quake caused the Sanriku 7.6 quake in a strict sense. So let's come to the last point, is today's Taiwan earthquake related to all of this. Today there was a magnitude 5.7 earthquake off of Hualien, eastern Taiwan, at about a depth of 20 kilometers, that's like 15 miles. And it produced a level 4 shaking in Hualien and Nantou, and some brief transport delays, and authorities warn of possible aftershocks up to magnitude 5 in the next few days. Tectonically, guys, Taiwan is a different beast. It sits at a very complex junction where the Philippine Sea plate collides with the Eurasian plate, not directly on the Pacific Okhotsk boundary of the Japan and Kamchatka trenches. Not the same zipper. Yes, everything is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, but in practice, the distance between the Sanriku epicenter and Hualien is thousands of miles, thousands of kilometers. Magnitude 5 to 6 earthquakes happen all the time around the world, continuously, especially along the Pacific Ring of Fire. There's hundreds of bigger ones a year along the Pacific Ring of Fire. So could they be part of some giant coordinated chain reaction? Guys, for dynamic triggering, where seismic waves from one big quake trigger another that's far away, we usually see that within minutes to hours, not days. And the evidence is very, very subtle anyways. So for static stress transfer across this distance and across multiple plate junctions, the effect is tiny compared to the already high background stress that is happening there all the time, basically. So the safe and honest answer is the Taiwan quake and today's Japan quake are most likely coincidental, both happening in a very active quake, a very active part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. So if someone wants to become an earthquake predictor, you're doing great at the Pacific Ring of Fire, because you can say every day, I feel something's coming, something bigger's coming, and poof, the Pacific Ring of Fire produces, and then like, here, I said it, right? But actually, the Pacific Ring of Fire is doing what it's doing continuously and constantly, no matter what we are saying or predicting. Of course, scientists can look at a pattern, but still it is doing what it's doing. So right now in Japan, are we looking at a precursor or something bigger? Let's put this in the clear. We are not seeing a copy, paste, repeat of the days before the 2011 earthquake. We are seeing a very active trench system that has already proven it can produce giant earthquakes. The magnitude 7.6 itself is big enough to be dangerous, whether it stays the main event or becomes the foreshock to something larger. That is something nobody can guarantee right now, and that's exactly why Japan has raised its alert level. But the stress transfer, that's the interesting part, and many of you guys, you're coming over from Dutch. He's very good at analyzing this stress transfer because there is a real connection, and by looking at that transfer, you can, or he can, make quite good assumptions of what's happening next. So guys, I hope you like this video. Tune in and check out all the videos here in the end screen. Really interesting stuff is happening all over the world. Please hype and like this video, share it with your friends. Let me know what you think. Do you think we will see a bigger one? Please comment. If you want to support the channel, link is here in the description. You can fill me up with coffee to keep me going. Thanks for your nice comments, for your supers, for joining my channel as a member by clicking this join button here. And I see you in a second in the next one.